Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend. I'm Jason Godbey, and today we're taking a look at the films from this year's New York Film Festival. We had the opportunity to attend the festival this fall as part of our No Rest for the Fest coverage, and joining me now to take a look at some of these films and talk about them is our favorite LA film critic, the man behind ActuallyPaid.com, Mr. William Hammon. Welcome, Bill.
Good to be back, my friend.
Great to have you, buddy. We got a lot of films to talk about. There was a lot of films at this festival. It's a prestige festival. It's awards time, right up your alley. So let's get into it. So what's our first film for the evening?
First up, we have Armageddon Time from director James Gray, who put out the absolutely brilliant Lost City of Zed a few years back, one of my favorite of the last decade. Basically, what we have here is it's kind of a coming-of-age story. It takes place in the fall of 1980 with the Reagan election kind of as a backdrop. You have this kid named Paul, played by Banks Repeta, who is a really good artist, but not that great of a student. And on his first day of sixth grade, he befriends a young boy named Johnny, played by Jalen Webb, who is seen as something of a troublemaker. The two basically have your normal sixth grader interactions, but one time they do get caught smoking weed in the bathroom, and that's enough for Paul's parents, played by Jeremy Strong and Anne Hathaway, and his grandfather, played by Anthony Hopkins, to put him in a private school so that he can, in essence, have the best chance possible at a future. The problem there is that he's immediately confronted with racism and anti-Semitism, and his friendship with Johnny becomes strained because he sees these bullies basically using racial slurs at him and doesn't know how to react for fear of his own social reprisals. I really enjoyed the dynamic that Banks Repeta has with Anthony Hopkins, this grandfatherly advice about you need to stand up for your friend. We're in this country because people tried to kill us and my parents. As he says, you got to be a mensch. And the rapport that those two have is absolutely brilliant and heartwarming in the extreme. There are a couple of heavy-handed moments, like they literally have Fred Trump, Donald's father, as one of the characters, and his sister Mary Ann, played by Jessica Chastain, giving a speech at the private school about how it's not a handout. You've earned it if you get an education. You're like that's a bit much, but the core of the film is really solid, and it's not a forgive the phrase, it's not a black and white type of situation. There's a lot of nuance in how this young boy, who is adjudicated to be a little bit slow on the uptake on things, tries to figure out how to deal with things, and when he just wants to, paint pictures and have fun with his friend who dreams of being an astronaut, despite the fact that he's from a broken home and has no chance. It's a really good portrait of situational privilege, because even as a kid from a middle-class Jewish family, he still has more of a leg up than Johnny does, but he has less of a leg up than his classmates. It's a really good way to kind of just blur the lines here. I really enjoyed it.
That sounds good. I wanted to see that myself, but I couldn't get out to see all the movies at the screening, so I'm glad that you could see some of them. I did get to see a few films at screenings. The first movie I saw was called Stars at Noon, starring Margaret Qualley and Joe Alwyn. Margaret Qualley is a 20-something sort of pseudo-journalist, and she finds herself in this horrible predicament. She's sort of trapped in Nicaragua. It's an interesting movie, I'll say that for it, and Qualley is wonderful. She's terrific. She's a highlight of the film. The acting is all very naturalistic, and technical elements up front. It's directed well, it's shot well, the tone is consistent throughout. It's a really well-acted movie, but it does have some problems. Qualley finds herself in this situation where she's in Nicaragua, and the government has sort of held her passport, and she can't find passage out of the country. Now, the book that this is based on was written in the 80s. The book is set in the middle 80s when we didn't have the greatest of relations with Nicaragua. But the movie is set now. In fact, it's set during COVID, so it's like 2020, 2021. So the problem is that the politics really don't match. Like the first thing you see is her sort of getting into this predicament where she's forced to sleep with this government official to try to get her papers back. And you're like, wait a minute, is there not a consulate? Is there not an embassy that she could go to? This is what people would do now. Now, in the 80s, it would be like that because we didn't really have diplomatic relations with Nicaragua. And it took me a while to figure out because I took the movie at its own merit. And then when I saw that it was based on a book from 1986, I was like, oh, now I get it. So anyway, she hooks up with this businessman who she winds up sleeping with just to get American money. So she's sort of prostituting herself out. And he turns out to be an English businessman. Apparently, he's in the oil business. He knows something he's not supposed to know or says something he's not supposed to say. The American CIA is now after him. So they get caught up in this sort of web, and they try to get out of the country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I did have some issues with it in terms of it's like everything would have made sense if they just set this in like 1985. But you literally see like COVID throughout. So like people are wearing masks. She goes into a hotel in the beginning of the movie. She gets her temperature checked. There's a COVID checkpoint. So all these things are, rooting it in now. And like I said, the performances are very good, very naturalistic. There is a lot of sex in the movie. From right off in the first 10 minutes, she's naked. And like I said, she's very good, but it's also probably like the rainiest, steamiest, wettest movie I've ever seen. Like it takes place in Nicaragua, and it looks like it was shot there. Like it's raining all the time. It's constant, like it's just rain and like basically in a Central American rainforest. It does have some good merits, but a lot of it just didn't make sense to me, unfortunately. Would I recommend it? I would if you're a Margaret Qualley fan and you want to see her in a star-making turn, absolutely. But if you kind of know a little bit about politics and have a little common sense, you might have to suspend some disbelief. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, what's the next film?
Next up, Decision to Leave. This is the official Academy entry for South Korea, and right up front, I'll say this: it probably should be considered the front runner for the Oscar for International Feature. This is something truly special. It comes from Park Chan-wook, who did The Handmaiden and Old Boy, among many other classics of Korean cinema. And it's this kind of Hitchcockian neo-noir mystery about a detective played by Park Hae-il who gets increasingly involved with a potential suspect in a homicide. Chinese actress named Tong Wei, who is just spectacular in this. She might have killed her husband, a mountain climber who fell to his death from a mountain. The weird thing is there's this amazing dichotomy of distance. The closer they get to each other physically, the further apart they get emotionally, and vice versa. There's a truly brilliantly choreographed scene where he's interviewing her at the police station. This is very early on in the process, but to kind of loosen her up a little bit and maybe potentially get a confession out of her or some details that she might have tried to keep clandestine, he orders in some high-end sushi boxes for them. Like his more loose cannon partner even comments like, why can't we have lunch like that? Kind of thing. And after they eat, they almost move in this ballet of cleaning up the interrogation room together. Like every square inch of the room, one of them is filling the space left by the other in each shot. It's so wonderfully done. And as he gets deeper and deeper into this investigation, he's an insomniac who is obsessed with high crimes. One of the recurring themes of the film is that he constantly has to give himself eye drops to keep himself awake. We're being told right up front that his perception may be blurred. That we really can't take anything at face value. So he tracks her home. He, in essence, spies on her. You know, it's a very voyeuristic take, but the editing in this is phenomenal because what he'll do is he'll focus on her through her window. He's out in a tree somewhere with binoculars. He sees her in the living room of her apartment. And then in quick cut fashion, he's in the room with her, moving around this, again, tightly controlled space as he absorbs her life, basically. And the way they keep going back and forth, the emotional bond that they form, it's almost erotic, even though it's completely sanitized. It's a wonderful contradiction that he keeps getting deeper and deeper with this woman, losing his objectivity in the process, and in essence, risking his own career and his own marriage. He works in Busan in South Korea, but he commutes from a small seaside town, I believe it's called Ipoh, where his wife lives. He actually only spends the weekends with his own wife. He lives in Busan the rest of the time while he's obsessively working on these cases. And yet he's found this potential femme fatale Black Widow who may put it all to an end. And not because she necessarily has any kind of nefarious ends in mind, but because she sees in him something of a savior. It's so incredibly layered between the main story, the subtext, the individual character development. I was blown away by this. This has got a lot of buzz around it, and after Bong Joon-ho broke through with Parasite a couple of years ago, South Korean cinema is really finally getting the attention it deserves. There are a lot of people who thought that Old Boy and The Handmaiden should have been nominated, but it just didn't happen for one reason or another. Like, Parasite was not only, it eventually broke records and made history by being the first foreign film to win Best Picture, but it was also the first South Korean film to win International Feature and the first to even be nominated. So now the rest of the world, or at least the Academy, seems to be catching up to this. And yeah, like, I would say that this is probably your front runner right now as far as international feature is concerned.
Yeah, and it sounds like a really strong recommendation from you.
Oh, absolutely. It's probably going to be in my top 10 or even my top 5 of the year.
All right, we'll get to that. Next episode, we'll we'll talk about the top fives and stuff. So there's another feature that I saw called Enys Men. It's a feature out of the Cornwall section of Britain. Wonderful. Mark Jenkin and Mary Woodvine actually had them on the show, interviewed them as part of their junket when they were at the festival. So we talked a bit about it then. I will say it's a very haunting film. Basically, the premise is this woman is isolated on an island doing some kind of a environmental study. It's set in 1973. She's all alone there, and then she starts to have these sort of haunting visions. So it's got kind of a horror element to it. It's very much like if you're maybe like a David Lynch type fan, but there is a lot of shades of Kubrick in the style. It's shot on 16 millimeter, which I'm a sucker for anyway. I just love 16 millimeter. But it is a slow burn, so you kind of have to and then I felt like I needed to see it again, because it's one of those films that there's quick flashes of things and you might not catch it, so you kind of have to really pay attention to it. Unfortunately, I had to watch it on a laptop. I didn't get to see it on the big screen, but it's really interesting film. But you kind of have to, I think you kind of have to like that type of cinema to really get it, because it's one of those things where you're like, okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then there's a lot of repetition in it. Mary Woodvine is very good. The performance is almost a silent movie performance. She gets very few scenes with anybody else, and she also, there's not a lot of dialogue. I mean, when I interviewed her, I said, Schwarzenegger had more dialogue in the first Terminator movie than she gets in this film, and she's basically the only one on screen for the most part. It's a really interesting movie, though. If you dig that kind of cinema, I would say check it out. All right, what we got next?
Next up is Till, that I believe had its premiere at the festival, its world premiere. This is the second major film from Chinonye Chukwu, who came out with Clemency a few years ago, which was just absolutely brilliant. This is her major studio follow-up. This one hit me kind of hard because the story of Emmett Till and how he was lynched back in 1955. When I was a kid, that was like the story that kind of like finally crystallized the idea of racism in the civil rights movement. Like we always had these, things about Martin Luther King and everything, and I loved learning about that stuff. But when I saw the pictures of Emmett Till's bloated, mutilated corpse in his coffin, it made me cry. I like it's seared in my memory forever. So the idea of making a film about this, it's been done before. There was an Oscar-nominated short film a couple years ago called My Nephew Emmett, which was about his kidnapping and murder in Mississippi. This movie, however, focuses much more on Emmett's mother, Mamie, played by Danielle Deadwyler. She had her breakthrough last year with The Harder They Fall. While we don't shy away from the fateful trip down from Chicago to Mississippi and the alleged whistling at a white woman that cost this teenage boy his life, Jalen Hall does a really good job playing Emmett. This is really about the aftermath. This is about how a woman who did her best as a mom, but due to circumstances well beyond her control, still lost her son and decided that she had to become a lightning rod. She had to become the center of a national message. The metamorphosis of her from normal mom to national advocate while she's still trying to mourn, and people from all sides, those sympathetic and those who aren't, are all basically being opportunistic in trying to advance an agenda through her, and she has to figure out all this stuff and balance it. It's really a well done performance, like best actress quality. I was quite impressed.
Yeah, it sounds really powerful. All right, so I'm gonna move on. We're gonna running out of time here, but I do want to talk a little bit about this film I saw called Showing Up, starring Michelle Williams, directed by Kelly Reinhardt, I think is how you say her name. They have worked together before. It's sort of a dramedy about this woman. She's a sculptor. She kind of works at this artist commune kind of place, school, and she's gearing up for an art show. And it's kind of a very slice of life kind of movie. Michelle Williams, of course, is very good in it. She's wonderful and everything. I saw her on Broadway. She's an amazing actor. And it's one of these films, it's well directed, it's well acted, everybody's very good in the film. We see the conflicts that she has with her mother, the relationship with her dad, with her brother, and her landlord. She has like a conflict with her landlord. At one point, she discovers this bird in her house. A pigeon has gotten to her house, and her cat's attempting to murder it. And she rescues the pigeon and kind of like sends it out the window. And then the next day, the landlord finds it, and she's like, "Oh, look, I found this wounded bird, and I'm nursing it back to health." And together through the film, they sort of nurse the bird back to health, and that's kind of funny. There's a few genuine like chuckles in the film, but I it's one of those movies that it kind of reminded me of like a 90s era Jim Jarmusch kind of film, like where the protagonist sort of bumps into other people, but nothing much really happens in the movie. And I kind of had the same problem with the Margaret Qualley picture as well. Like, there didn't seem to be any big character arc. There doesn't seem to be any huge denouement. There doesn't seem to be any movie in this movie. And but I know some people will probably dig it just because of the way it portrays these people, and this sort of life. And it is kind of fun, but I just found myself at the end going, why? Like, I feel like I'm just hanging out with these people. I'm like, I wanted more movie in my movie, basically. But that being said, performances are really strong, very very well directed. The camera moves only when it needs to, and it's very precise. You can tell the director she knew what she wanted, and it's well done. But I just kind of wondered what's the point of this? Like, why are we watching this? But anyway,
I
moving
mean,
on.
one quick question that I'm sure is on everybody's mind. Is Michelle Williams playing a mother in this movie?
She's not playing a mom. She's playing.
Okay, that makes like 5 total for her career.
So she's playing a woman who she's like single. She doesn't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or anything like that. She lives alone, and it's kind of a lonely portrait. And I guess what they're trying to say with the film is that she sort of finds something in the relationship she has, sort of bringing this bird back into health. But
So she's mothering the bird. Okay.
it's a little nurturing happening with the bird. So you could say she's a bird mom.
I'm not trying to be mean spirited, but it is hilarious to me that like literally 90% of the roles that Michelle Williams has had as an adult is her being some sort of sainted mother. I was like, she's a fantastic actress. I love her to death, but holy crap, a typecast.
Yeah, I mean, she was. I saw her in, I believe it was Blackbird on Broadway, and she was wonderful. Like she's
Yeah.
great,
She's fantastic.
But
I just love it when she gets to do more than just that.
yeah, I just if you're gonna watch this movie, don't expect anything big to happen.
Gotcha.
Like don't expect the big climax because you will be sorely disappointed. All right, I think we got room for like maybe one more.
Okay.
What's the next film that we got here?
We have Tar coming from Todd Field. If that's a name that sounds a little bit familiar, I hope it does because he did the absolutely fantastic Little Children and In the Bedroom, but those are the only films he's done until this point, and it's been nearly, I think almost more than 15 years since he's put out a film. This is very much a Best Actress vehicle for Cate Blanchett. She'll be chasing her, I believe, 3rd Oscar in this one. She plays a fictional conductor named Lydia Tarr. That's where the title comes from, though I don't know why the Tar has an accent on it. She's American. I don't get it. But she's basically at the absolute peak of her field. They say that she's won an EGOT, which, again, why would you make a fictional character to do that? Because there's only been like 15 who have done it for real. But she's now like the resident conductor at the Berlin Symphony, and she's world renowned, everything. The film itself opens up with basically a New Yorker seminar hosted by Adam Gopnik. So I was like, it's very high-minded and intellectual in these kind of regards. The main story is that as she's preparing for what she thinks is going to be her crowning achievement, conducting Gustav Mahler's Fifth Symphony, her career and her private life starts to spiral out of control because a former student of hers has committed suicide. And there's a very strong indication that they had an affair, and that as a result of the breakup, this poor young woman basically lost her mental stability, couldn't get a job. It's kind of like an inverse of like a Harvey Weinstein type of situation. Like there's nothing coercive about anything that it appears Lydia's ever done, but she's definitely had inappropriate actions here. She even has an attraction to her new cellist while they're doing all this. She's caught in the middle of all the stuff like that, and you can just slowly see every aspect of her career and existence just completely disappearing. There's a really strong kind of subtle way that they illustrate the deterioration, because during that opening sequence where she's being interviewed by the New Yorker for this seminar, she basically has like 2-3 minute monologues that are completely unbroken along with the shot. So she's memorized all of this stuff, or she's improvising it to perfection. And then as the film goes on, her speeches become shorter and shorter and shorter, to the point where she's basically only giving one-word responses in a very curt manner whenever someone is questioning her on any front. It's a very subtle touch, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. It does get a little bit heavy-handed, and at times there's a weird little challenge in the film, because the big side effect of the Me Too movement is this idea of believe all women. Well, what do you do when all parties involved are women? Who do you believe? Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know, but it was something that kind of stuck out to me.
With these films, okay, so New York Film Festival, just to kind of editorialize a little bit, it's a very prestige-oriented film festival. It comes in, it's in the fall. and it's kind of like one of those lead up to award season type festivals. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I would say, for these films, like, who are they for? Who would you say that this type of film is for? This festival might be for, if you wanted to attend, say, if you were happen to have tickets or get to Lincoln Center, who would this festival be for?
I mean, if you're like me and you kind of obsess over award season, it's definitely for you. This film in particular, it's very much a critic's film.
All right, I got to wrap up. So, if people want to read your reviews, find out more about what you're seeing next, where can they find you on the web?
You can find me at actuallypaid.com. That's the main blog where I do all my reviews. I also have a YouTube channel at Actually Paid. I usually use that to make fun of bad movie trailers every month, but I do a few other things as well. And you can also find me on Twitter, also at actually_paid.
And that's all the time we have for you today. Thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including more movie reviews, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, youtube.com/getbehindtherabbit. I'd like to thank my friend Bill Hammon and our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.